And right now it's saying no data. No data. And looks like it's not capturing.
I just got a notification you went live.
Yep, I'm not seeing my chat though.
Well, I'm in there now. I'll pass on anything I see.
No, that's fair. Oh, there it is. I can set up a dock for chat. I'm gonna set this up similar to how I set up my Twitch, where I have one thing on one side, the other thing on the other side, and now I can see my chat on my right hand side. Now I just need to fix whatever the fuck is going on here. And this is annoying. Let's try this. Game capture. And alright, let's try this. Nope, nada. Alright, well, there's a million other ways to do stuff. So, let's get rid of this. And I should be able... There we go. Alright, hey! So I've got Doom going because I'm not sure what I can actually do in the other thing, but yeah, let's get this started and we'll take it from there. Also, since I now have everything hardlined, everything should be relatively clean. I don't know how quickly the audio is going through, but we're gonna find out. Anyways,
all right.
So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Eternal Plains. My name's Blaze, and it has been a fucking while. For those of you who are probably going, what the fuck is going on? Where have you been? What the hell is going on? Let's answer a couple of those questions, and then we'll get into what this is going to be about. Yes, I know.
You haven't streamed since you moved, right?
I don't think I posted... It's been some years. It has been some years. So, for those who don't know, I have been live on Twitch regularly. However, while I have been live on Twitch, I haven't really touched on YouTube because YouTube is a lot of work. Aside from Josh here and a couple of friends, I really haven't gotten around to anything. Let's just be honest here. I've been working. I've been working. I stream every now and again, and doing editing for videos and all that is time consuming and troubling. Hence this podcast. Am I calling it a podcast? Oh yes, absolutely. Why am I calling it a podcast? Because it's meant more for audio than it is for visuals. Are there visuals? Yes, but the visuals are going to change constantly, so don't get too excited. While I'm playing this week, I might be doing something else next week, and it's just going to change from thing to thing to thing to thing. However, back to what's been going on. Moved to Kansas with my beloved. Went through a lot, been through a couple of different jobs. I now work for a very nice company who I will not divulge who that is as of current, because I just feel like it would be in bad taste. Not because I think they're a bad company or anything like that, but because honestly, I don't want to be tied to them or their ethics, or vice versa. AKA, if I say something that is not correct in their viewpoint, I don't want them going, hey, you tied your name to us. You tied your name to us, and now we're coming after your ass.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I would like to keep my job for as long as possible because I've been working there for the last 3 years, going on almost 4. And people who really want to find out, I'm sure you guys have ways of finding out. But on a public level, no one needs to fucking know. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Where is everybody else? Well, obviously I am living with my beloved still. Try has been working his ever-loving ass off as well, and he's also been streaming off and on. Matter of fact, we might see him pop into the stream, we might not. Apparently he's having some gut issues. Really hope that works out for him. Yeah, it's one of those moments. But he might be joining in. Okay, now that we've got those fineries out of the way, let's talk about what this podcast is about. Welcome to World Crafters. Why did I go with World Crafters instead of Builders? Because I think this is going to be a little bit of a different animal than I originally pitched to my friends. In what way? Well, let's get in on that. Oh. Huh. I got myself a gimp mask. Nice. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be quite literally crafting worlds. We're going to be talking about both big worlds, small worlds, stuff like that. So, Sasquatch, do you have an example of a small world?
In what context?
So, in the case of a small world, we are going to be talking about a world that takes place in a very, very discrete location. AKA, while there is a greater world around this place, we never see it. I'm actually going to give an example. Sleeping Beauty. Okay? Sleeping Beauty only really takes place in that one kingdom, right? We meet Maleficent, we meet the three good fairies, right? Eventually the prince does come. Hopefully the prince is from a different country, because if he's not, oh boy. Not that that's out of character for medieval Europe, but still. But for the most part, it all takes place in the singular kingdom, right?
Yeah.
So that's a small world. We never need to know about any of the rest of the world. It's not relevant. It's not important. Quite literally, to these characters, this is the entire world. This is their entire existence. They, aside from the prince, right? This is the only existence they ever know. Now, when you start talking a medium world, right? We'll bump up the stakes here a little bit. A medium world, we're gonna go with like Harry Potter. All right. Now, people are like, well, Harry Potter mostly takes place in Hogwarts. You're correct. It does. And while there are notions to the other bits of the world out there and other schools of magic and all that, let's be completely honest, Harry Potter mostly takes place in a couple of different places. First off, it takes place in England. I say England because they do kind of traverse around a little bit, but not too terribly much. Later on, the books extend to America and stuff like that, but for the most part, it takes place in these isolated places, but mostly Hogwarts. The reason why I call it a medium world, not a small one, is because it has to start to envelop more of the world. It has to start to talk about, well, this is what's going on in politics. This is what's going on in this part of the world. This is what's going on in this part of the world. And while the characters may never touch these places, like, I don't think Harry ever goes to Azkaban, right? He never goes there. But we know it exists. We know it's a part of the world, and therefore it has to have its own lore and everything, right?
Correct. Yes.
So, next we have to talk about large worlds. Now, Sasquatch, this should be an easy one for you. What is a good large world to play with?
I'd say a good large world is on screen right now.
I think this actually goes a little bit farther than large, but yeah, that's fair. Let's actually shrink that one down just a little bit, because Dune definitely, well, it does take place mostly here on Arrakis. It It very
It
much,
involves other star systems. Yes.
yeah, it gets quite a bit larger. Let's shrink it down just a little bit, and let's see. Let's go with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and we'll talk about. Let's stick with the first two arcs, right? So Stardust Crusaders and I think it was like Bloody Mask or something like that. It's either
Something like
Blood
that.
Mask
In
or Bloodstone or something like that. Anyways,
less than 20 minutes, and we're already a JoJo's reference. Good job, everyone.
I know, right? But yeah, I mean, that one encompasses a good chunk of the world. I mean, we look at France, we look at England, we look at America, we look at
Italy.
Yeah, we look at a lot of the world, right? And we're only covering the first two arcs. We're not even talking about like the rest of JoJo's. Like we're not going into Giorno Giovanni or any of that. Just the first two arcs cover the world. So yeah, I mean, when you take it to that kind of consideration, that would be a large world. Now let's bump it up to the final level of world, we're just gonna, instead of calling it large, we're just gonna call it galactic. In which case, yes, Dune is a perfect galactic world. Another good one, right? Because I have to throw it out there, Gurren Lagann, which, god damn, that show amped up so fucking hard so very quickly. And that one's a good example of all the different versions of worlds, right? Because your first one is to start off in the village. From Simone and I want to say Kazuma, but I'm not sure. Was it Kazuma?
Maybe.
I'm trying to. My brain is not 100% working. I apologize, everybody. I've not been feeling great today, but I'm still fucking doing this. Anyways, that is their entire world was that one little village, and then they broke free. And the moment they broke free, suddenly it became this entire world-based landscape. And then it went from being a world-based landscape to a interplanetary landscape. And by the time you end the show, it is a multiverse landscape. Like, that final fight apparently takes place in a multiverse. Yeah. Yeah, you want to talk about as big as you get. When you start talking multiverses, that's when you've kind of reached a peak. At which point, I don't think you can go much farther, right? For the record, I'm inviting other people in, just so everybody knows. Okay, anyways. So yeah, those are the different levels of world we're going to try and talk about. And we're going to try and cover different worlds on and off throughout. The idea is we are going to talk about how these worlds are built, what they encompass, how much work has to be put into all of them, and basically what to do to build these, as well as just creating our own worlds as we go along. It's going to be a real mixed bag. So yeah, that's essentially what World Builders is in this particular case. And I think we've said all this in a matter of 15 minutes, give or take. So yeah. Now, Josh, what would you say goes into a good world? Like, what has to be there for it to function? Now, this is a tricky question because there are some things that you might go, oh, well, it needs this, and it really doesn't. And then there'll be other things where like, oh, well, it doesn't need this, but it really does. So, what do you think is required for a world to functionally work?
That's a list.
Give me your most basic list. We'll start there.
Well, I always start with a as believable landscape setting, whatever you want to call it, for understand how the terrain defines the different cultures.
Okay, so for you, the landscape is a big starter. That's a very fair one in my opinion. I do believe that I do believe that without a appropriate landscape, a story can easily fall apart. Um, here's a question: does the landscape have to be 100% defined, or can it be a little bit loosey goosey?
I think that largely depends on what story or stories you're trying to tell in it.
That's fair, and I
Yeah, so
actually agree.
solid yet malleable.
Hey, Demon, welcome to the show. So yeah, I actually agree. It really depends on the type of story. In some cases, you definitely want a set map so that your readers can kind of follow along, right? If you don't have a set map, it can get a little bit funky with certain stories. But then you have other stories where if the map is too solid, it takes away from the story in a big way. Let's use another relatively fun but interesting setting, Nightingale. Nightingale, the game, takes place in what can best be described as the Never Never, the Fey realms. For those who do not understand what that means, I'm going to break it down as best I can in a way that is reasonable. The Never Never, the land of Fays, is basically built on dreams. And it's also built on layers of dreams. And there's our important marker right there.
So it's an ogre.
Kind of, but somehow worse. So here's the thing. The farther you get into the Feywilds, the weirder and stranger and more convoluted everything gets. So I'll try to give an example as best I can, and hopefully not, screw this up. Your first dream is that of a hippopotamus, right? Pretty easy, pretty basic. Maybe you've never actually seen a hippopotamus, so you're just kind of imagining it, but it's this big, hulky creature, weirdly big teeth, looks kind of fat, and it likes to live in water. Okay, cool. Pretty basic, right? Well, your next dream is a hippopotamus that somehow got mixed with a tiger. Okay, so now a bunch of really, really big teeth, maybe still kind of fat, but now it's got like these weird stripes on it. And instead of like just having these big hoofy feet, it's got big hoofy feet with like claws on them, right? Well, then you have the dream within the dream within the dream. Yes, we're going there. Where now that
It's
version.
Inception.
Hi, I'm
Yes,
Matt
actually.
Damon. How you doing?
Pretty much, yeah, but you can also see how the Feywilds as a place can get so out of control so very quickly. Like, conceptually as a place, the bare basic of the Feywilds isn't all that bad. But the deeper and deeper you go, oh, it just becomes a clusterfuck. And conceptually for a story, right, it can take on an entirely new face. It can completely change your perspective of what is reality, right? So the deeper and deeper the Feywilds get, the worse and worse it's going to get. Dreams of giants with bat-like heads but wolf-like legs and frickin' wings like a butterfly, just the weirdest, most distorted things. But that's also what makes them a fun place for a good story. It's also the reason why the Fae will constantly try to remind people, hey, yeah, you don't want to go too far in. It gets dangerous in there, and you can't really comprehend. So yeah, something to consider when you're talking about stuff like the Feywilds. In that case, I think having a loose, very loose landscape is going to serve a lot better for that story. A great example of this is, and this is not a joke, Alice in Wonderland. There is nothing that states that Alice in Wonderland does not take place in the Feywilds. If anything, it makes more sense when you think of it that way contextually. It also means that by the time she actually reaches the Queen of Hearts, she is as deep and probably still some of the early levels of the Feywilds, which
I mean, the other take with Alice in Wonderland, there's actually two more takes kind of thing. One could be is she had something she wasn't supposed to eat and now is just basically on an acid mental
trip.
bender, basically. Yep. Or the other one is when she went down the rabbit hole, she fell and broke her neck and died, and she's basically just living in Fantasyland now.
I mean, that is a possibility, yeah. But it's also one where, like I said, playing the idea of it being the Feywilds makes sense. But either way, doesn't really matter where it supposedly is. It's the idea of what the world's like. That's what we're supposed to be covering. We're doing a shit job. No, I'm just... So, what would be a solid world map? Do you think, Sasquatch? What's a good story that has the exact opposite there, where instead of loosey goosey, it's just rock hard?
You want to use the obvious answer?
Go for it.
Tolkien.
Lord of the Rings, rock hard, very direct mapping. I believe he actually had a full map drawn, didn't he?
Yep.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So outside of that one continent where everything takes place, that's their entire world. And it's all drawn out and all very very obvious.
Well, he does have technically another map, but he hadn't gone over it yet. It was basically the entirety of the West.
Yeah.
Where all of the elves came from before they came into Middle Earth, and which they were forbidden to return to by basically the creators because of what the elves did and how they did it and why they did it. They go over it within the entirety of the Silmarillion, which basically does all the world building, all the lore building, and all the good and bad. Basically, yeah. It goes over everything. It's basically the Bible of Tolkien.
Which makes sense. And yeah. And I would consider Tolkien's world, despite the fact that it's not a globe, I would still call it a large world because it encompasses multiple kingdoms, multiple places. It's a very broad, very, very broad location of which to speak of.
It's very broad. There are defined borders between areas.
Yeah. It covers enough bases, in my opinion, that it would still be considered a large world, even though it wouldn't be a global world. It is probably the best way to put it. Now, having said that, right? And even then, I push that on a large, even though it could be argued as a medium. Right? Because, yeah, there's a bit of wiggle room there.
If you really want a really fleshed out world, you'd go for the land of Allegasia.
I mean, fair. But I'm going to throw out a very solid world that has very defined borders and everything else, right? And I just lost it. God damn it. Me and my fucking brain. Sherlock Holmes. It's grounded in reality, right? So therefore, because it's grounded in reality, the world is our world, within relative speaking. So when you think of it from that perspective, right, it kind of changes the sensibility just a little bit, correct?
Yep.
But once again, it's got very defined features. We know exactly where the entire map is because it's our fucking map, right? And it is definitely a large world, despite the fact that they never really go all that international as far as I know. I actually have not gotten that deep into Sherlock Holmes, if I'm being completely honest. So I don't 100% know. Please feel free to correct me if I am wrong.
I have never seen Sherlock Holmes or read anything for Sherlock Holmes, so I would
I
not
have
know.
to go back and reread it.
Oh, I'm currently reading it. I guess another one, which is a book series that I just got done reading, the Air series. The Air series basically takes real life and adds in magic to the thing via some interesting problems. For lack of better terms, there was one person who had magic, right? And they kind of wanted to share the blessing. Well, when they shared the blessing, they basically became her kids. Well, the kids rebelled, and the people were set free, and basically an endless war kind of started between all of them. Partially because people who have power are people who have power. You know, long, short there. It's not a hard understanding. Turns out people don't always get along with one another. Who would have thunk, right?
Yeah, who'd have guessed?
Anyways, the Air series actually takes place. I think it's several thousand years after the original inception of the magical guilds. So you're literally talking about descendants upon descendants upon descendants. Or at least that's what I would like to say. Turns out that some people in the story have actually been around since day one. They are that long lived. Yeah. It's a good series if you guys ever get interested in it. Highly recommend it. I actually just got done reading the final book of the 5 as of recent. But as a world building, it was definitely interesting to be sure. Hello, love. Okay. So, having gone over that, we've addressed big worlds, medium worlds, small worlds, and obviously very, very, very large worlds. Where do we want to start the discussion today? Like, we've already started with what the podcast is about. Do we want to pick a world and just kind of hone in on that and maybe give the viewers an idea of what we're playing with here, or...
I mean, we can. What do you think, Eamon?
Well, yeah.
I'd say do you like the idea of the structure between a small world compared to the structure of a large world or a supermassive world?
Okay, that's
and
fair.
what details it would entail?
Well, I guess let's we can start with a small world. Small world would be a village, or we'll say a small fiefdom, town, anything that is a singular place, right? So
basically everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
There's not much going on otherwise.
And even if
how.
not everybody knows everybody, it's close enough, right? I think in this case, a good example of that would be Beauty and the Beast. Because
I could also make a case for Little House on the Prairie.
Little House on the Prairie is another good one, yeah.
A little toaster that could.
So I'm going to say that one presses a little bit more on the medium, because that one's a journey. And I think with the journey, part of the journey is meeting people that are very much outside your
close-knit
norm.
community.
Yeah. So I would say any good journey, right? Any good journey story is going to be a medium to large world, at bare minimum.
What about Breakfast Club?
That would be a small world. Actually, that'd be a very small world, because doesn't that take place mostly in like a neighborhood in a high school?
Yeah, but basically it's everybody meeting each other, getting to know each other because they're all from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
So it technically a large-sized world compressed into a small world.
Yeah, though.
Ideologically.
Yeah, ideologically, which I guess we'll start pressing on to the other things. Social, right? In a small world, you don't need much social diversity. Everybody's basically kind of similar in one way or another. There's always going to be the oddballs and stuff like that. Oh, I have messaged. Who's messaging me? Oh,
Not me. Not yet.
but nah. So someone was replying to something that I posted earlier. So yeah, I mean, in a small town and all that, most everybody is going to be similar enough. Uh, I guess an example of that one would be, I can't remember the actual story. It's the Lovecraftian one with Wilbur Wheatley.
Oh yeah.
I don't remember the actual name, but essentially most of the story takes place more or less in this tiny little town that is in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. So you've got a bunch of people who I'm not gonna call them hicks. I'm not gonna be that rude, but you basically got a bunch of country people who are set in their ways, have their own ideals and beliefs, right? And then you've got the Wetleys who are just so far out there that you can't help but think them odd, or I think, as Lovecraft put it, take them as queer. Queer not meaning gay in this context, just to point that out. I don't know our age range on who's going to be watching this, so...
I mean, you could go back and say with like Tolkien, you know, using gay as in the happy context.
Yeah. That's something you're going to notice in older worlds and older stories, is the older variants of words. A great version, or a great a variant of this is perversion, right? Because perversion means to
corrupt,
distort, or corrupt. So one could argue, oh, well, you perverse this ideal. The idea being you perverse whatever this idea was into something.
So you took an idea that was good and you made it into something that was bad.
Not necessarily like that. So here's the thing. Technically, you can take something that's bad and turn it into something good, and it would still be considered perversing.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to go with the reverse analogy with that as well, but I was just giving just a basic analogy of perversing something is to basically turn it into what it's not supposed to be.
That is a very good definition of that, yes. But yeah, culture. Culture in a small world is generally going to be semi-universal. And I say semi because, like I said, there's always going to be those queer, awkward, bizarre people who don't quite fit the mold. And honestly, sometimes those are your best heroes or your worst villains. The people who are so far out of the norm that something changes. But on a social aspect, I think that's important. Fury, please don't grab the curtains like that. I think in a medium or large world, we actually see a lot more social diversity. So what's your guys' take on religion? What does religion have to be in a story at all, or is it a requirement?
So religion basically sets a foundation for what your society, like if you do like a belief system, it basically sets the groundwork for laws and rules to have meaning behind them.
To some degree, I agree. I believe
And you can have multiple religions in the same environment, and they can still clash, and they can still come together.
this is true. I
But
don't think
sometimes, they can't, and therefore you get conflict.
which conflict is what drives the story. Let's just be honest. It also can drive a world. Because once again, as much as I would love to go into story building, we're not here about story building, we're here about world building. I do not think religion is a necessity for a world, but I do think it does add an extra flavor or texture to the world. It could be either in a good way or a bad way. Because even the most righteous of people, right, can still do evil. I think a good example of this is, I can't remember the character's name, but the bad guy from Hunchback of Notre Dame, right?
Oh,
The one cardinal.
Frollo?
He was a very evil man, but he justified his actions through the church. Which I almost want to say is even more despicable, because going back to our definition of perversing, he definitely perversed the ideals of the church to meet his own means.
Basically, in the same context of using the church to uplift those that give, it's to condemn those that don't.
Yeah. And once again, an idea of how religion
Technically, that
can
can be
shape a
with
story.
any religion.
It can, but we'll we'll leave that can of worms to the side for a little bit for now, because yeah. Okay. We've talked about does the world need solidity? Do we need a dignified map? We said that varies. We talked about religion and social bits a bit. Okay. Here's a major question, and I want an honest answer from both of you. Does a world need a main character?
The world can be its own main character.
What about you, Demon?
Not necessarily. You can have people that rise to the occasion, but they aren't your typical hero. Like, they know something is bad, and they step forth to do something about it, but they don't see themselves as a hero. They just see themselves as a necessity to stop what's going on.
Well, I didn't say hero. I said a main character.
Hero, main character, I'm using it in the same context.
Fair. I'm gonna definitely push an interesting series, because Lord knows I quit this game ages ago. League of Legends Arcane. Let's be completely honest. The two main characters of that story are Jace, or sorry, the three: Jace, Echo, and Jinx. But even if those three weren't there, that world would still went on. That world had so much conflict already in place that even if those three were non-existent and the story didn't focus on them, that world would have still propelled itself into utter chaos.
No. If you saw the World of Arcane Season 2, you would know that's not the case. When Echo does the time shenanigans and gets transferred to the alternate world, where everything is all peaceful.
It is all peaceful, but that's just it. Like, even in that peaceful world, we know something as, the outside people that contradicts this. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
The fact that he doesn't belong in that timeline.
Well, that too, but the other nation, the nation that the next series is going to be about. You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
I do. I just can't think of the name at the moment right away. I know it's
Fair.
not Demacia, it's...
Yeah, no, Demacia is like weirdly religious, which that one's going to be an interesting story as well, because we get to see how Lux actually gets into that, because yeah, they see magic as almost evil in that particular part of the world.
Noxus.
There
the
you
one.
go. Yeah, no, Noxus would have still brought war to those people, which would have still driven up chaos. Ironically, I think with their chaos already invoked and Heimerdinger and the rest of them actually being actively part, I think they were actually more prepared for catastrophe than had those characters not existed.
I feel like if the idea of Hextech did not exist, that Noxus wouldn't have done anything to try to do it yet. They would have conquered most of the other areas around, and then...
I don't agree with that. And there's a reason why I don't agree with that. But their mindset basically promotes them to seek power. Now, they may not have gone as far as they did, because let's face it, having Hextech available definitely kind of poked the bear. But you can still look at people like Katarina, right? Who is an utter nightmare to deal with. Same thing with Darius, right? Another utter nightmare to deal with as a person, that the amount of catastrophe that would have hit would have been straightforward and just forthwith, right? Which once again will propel the world forward. But once again, that's singling out individual characters and not the overarching story of the world, which the world story can basically be summarized as a weird mixture of war, peace, and conflicting ideals. Which I think that defines most good stories, right?
Kinda.
Well, most good stories. We'll go that route. And yes, there are bad stories out there. And I will try my absolute best not to shame them too much. So let's talk about a bad story that has an okay world. Let's talk about Twilight. And I'm pretty sure whatever viewer rate we just had just left.
Don't
I
worry,
know, I'm
someone's
still
gonna-
here. Apparently, I'm the only one watching stream, so.
I was trying to be funny, man. But actual jokes aside, right?
This is your viewer count right now.
I know, right? Hey, copyright. Copyright. Stop it. We're on YouTube now. We can't get away with as much. We have to actually censor ourselves a little bit.
Not my fault YouTube is dyslexic.
I mean, let's not bite the hand that feeds us. Well, what am I saying? They don't even feed us. Okay.
Unless you're running ads on your stuff, then they're feeding you. But if you're not running ads, you know.
I can't run ads, so there you go. But they can still give me copyright strikes on my channel, which could actually get rid of my channel, which would piss me off. But I digress. Anyways, so Twilight as a world, relatively interesting. Vampires, werewolves, pretty basic, pretty classic, pretty straightforward. But it also still gives the idea of, okay, well, what's the world like? How does it function? who all exists in it. Obviously, you've got a bunch of different supernatural creatures, and it also still leaves room for other creatures to pop in. I have never actually read the books, and I have no intention of ever reading the books. But from what I do know, it seems like it's a fairly solid built world. What are your guys' opinions on that?
I think it gets more interesting when you when you view it through the fact that the author, I forget her name, was Mormon, and Edward's functionally an allegory for Mormon angels.
Mm.
No wonder they're
That-
all sparkly and not burning.
Yeah, I was about to say, that explains much more than it has any right to. I'm not sure what to do with that information. I'm not sure I want to deal with that information, if I'm being completely honest.
This is my take on Twilight.
That's like Meowschwitz in there.
We're gonna have a minor fight here. You keep using those clips, damn it.
Look, as long as it's under 5 seconds, you're scared good.
See, you would think that, but they will still copyright strike you into the ground. There's the dumb shit.
I wish then they're just nitpicking you for no fucking reason.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm not gonna deny that. Not at all. But anyways, another interesting story, though I'm not always a fan of different stuff. Let's look at the world of this is actually a good story. I just thought about this. The Goonies. What sized world would you guys consider the Goonies, and what would you consider like its social crafting and all that?
I never really watched the Goonies, so I wouldn't know.
I've never seen it.
Good night, everybody. No, I'm just. Goonies is basically you got a bunch of kids who get into some trouble, right? End up trying to search for treasure, find out there's a bunch of muggers, bandits, blah blah blah, and then finding what can best be described as an actual fucking pirate ship. Yeah. It's kind of a wild, crazy story, but the best way to describe it is a bunch of not even teenage kids go on an adventure in their local neighborhood and actually find the adventure. Yeah. Let's see, what... I'm trying to think of what else we can pick apart without just going headlong into one of our own works. You know what, screw it. Let's just go into one of our own works and we'll go from there, because I do want to get into some world building. And I feel like that's what we're here for anyways. So let's talk about our, I want to say D&D campaign. It's not D&D, it's Pathfinder. Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Ozzy Mistra. So, me and Sasquatch spent some time to actually build a story called Ozzy Mistra. And I say story because our players are basically making the story happen. And not only are they making it happen, they are... I don't want to say they're the main characters, but they are some definite big characters in the world. And we'll kind of go with how me and Sasquatch kind of tackled these, and Demon, feel free to jump in as you think about it, right? So we developed, if I'm not mistaken, 4 separate major kingdoms, right?
Yep.
2 of which were highly religious, 2 of which were highly technological. to the point of almost being religious. And then we had, if I'm not mistaken, a bunch of free kingdoms, which did not take sides. So, I say kingdoms, I should say empires. That's the better way to put it. You have 4 different empires, and then you got a bunch of singular kingdoms. Now, the reason why this is important to understand is the free kingdoms do not have to abide by the rules of either the religion or the technological supremacy. They can kind of do their own thing. Whereas if you start going into these other bits, right, these other empires, it starts to get a little bit more tricky. Our players have mostly been going through the free worlds. They touched just barely into a religious kingdom where one of our player characters actually is from, which made a big difference because, for lack of better terms, he's essentially the equivalent of a princeling. I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah, that's accurate. I'd say he's a princeling.
He's a princeling. Oh, jeez. He's a princeling without actually being a princeling. And I say that because, for all intents and purposes, his kingdom, while it did have a religious leader, from what I understand, he was a religious leader. His entire MO was he was there to help provoke religion and belief and stuff like that. Granted, the belief could vary. I did the wrong thing, didn't I? I probably did. Son of a bitch. And now they are moving back into the Freelands, where they are about to meet, I want to say corruption, but I don't consider mafioso corruption. I consider mafioso to be more of a people's government with underlining of crime. If that makes any sense. Now, we worked with our players to help create some bits of this world. Demon, if I'm not mistaken, your bit of the world is you are actually from the lower levels, like the way lower levels, where trash is just kind of compiled, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, to flush out this world a bit more, just so that the average person can understand what the hell it is we're talking about, the world is a bunch of islands. Mistra takes place in the Sky Sea. The Sky Sea, quite literally being the idea of, well, we've got all these floating islands out in the middle of buttfuck everywhere, where the land has been broken up into a landscape of floating landscapes. Each landscape sits either a little bit higher or a little bit lower than the others, and generally floats on a designated path. But to make things even more awkward, higher levels are generally seen as more prestigious and have more options, whereas the farther down you go, the worse and worse your situation kind of gets. So Demon's character, Syndria, hailing from some of these lower levels, kind of gets the raw end of the stick, because they are basically growing up on a trash pile, where all the refuse and everything else is just kind of filtered down. Then you have people like Sanyolo, who are from the middle to middle upper areas, so he's had a semi-privileged life by comparison. He basically, trying to think of the best way to phrase and word certain things. He basically is a racer through and through. That's his entire life. That's his entire job. That's his everything. He's a racer that goes through and races. That's all he does. That's all he knows. He's, from what I can tell, not very smart. And it's just how things work for him. Then you have Tri's character, Zonkroc, which, once again, kind of a princeling of a religious
He's
city
very
state.
good at diplomacy.
He is good at diplomacy. But then we have our last character, our last player, Ewan. Ewan is should we just use the word different? I think using the word different is the best option here.
Yeah, different.
So Ewan's character is leftovers of a prior soul. And I say that with the full idealism of his character is there, but not there necessarily. Essentially, he's trying to find himself. In this particular case, quite literally. Yeah, I don't know how else to put that.
So that's fair.
So
That's a fair description.
Let's talk a little bit more about how the world's orientated. So we basically took in the world and we've broken it down into 3 separate basic ideas of levels. And I believe there are 7 layers higher, if I'm not mistaken, right? I'm not double checking my notes here. I'm just kind of trying to rattle off from the top of my head.
Yeah, I think we agreed on 7. That sounds right.
The top layers basically being the most prestigious and the most wealthy. Whereas once you get down to layer number 1, it gets pretty crappy. On top of that, because these are floating islands, you also have to consider how sunlight works. Oh boy, is sunlight a bitch. Because on the top layers, you're going to get a ton of sunlight all the time. Especially seeing as you are generally above cloud level. But this also means that by the time you get to the bottom, you almost never see the sun. Between noxious fumes, poisonous gases, basically all that fun stuff, you don't really see the sun all that often. So seeing the sun is almost a rare treat. Because once again, remember, the more messed up the top is, it's just going to get so much worse the farther and farther down you go.
Ooh, that would be a good idea. Thank you for giving me an idea for an NPC, Blaze.
Okay. Glad to help, I guess. This means that Sandria, you probably haven't actually seen the sun all that much up until you got to where you are now. Which, considering you're a bird person, probably means that's one of the reasons why she's kind of a happy ball of what the fuck. I really don't know what else to call a demon.
The world will never know.
I know, right? So, yeah, now that we've kind of covered that Mushugana, yeah, no, we've basically gone through and we've made all these different kingdoms. And upon making all these different kingdoms, we wrote down a bunch, and we have how many religions have we made? Like pretty much a religion per god.
Pretty much, yeah.
Not to forget the fact that there is also a religion of the worm, which while religion does play a pretty big part in Azimystra, it's not the defining factor. Like even in the religious states, I don't think we made it a defining factor. I think while it definitely changes how people act and view things, it doesn't It doesn't force itself into their lives for the most part unless they let it. Might be the best way to put it. Now, on the other hand, we have the technological side, which, Demon, do you care about spoilers? Because if you care about spoilers, this might be the time for you to amstray.
Nope. I have no care about anything.
Okay. It's going to be a bit of a spoiler, but it shouldn't affect gameplay too terribly much, I don't think. Because it's going to deal with the Empire. The Empire you are currently facing, by the way. So, we created an Imperial supergiant where technology is everything. And they literally view your stature in life based on your technology. So, if you're an automaton, they think semi-highly of you because you've at least taken the steps to be full machine. Or maybe you were just born that way. Maybe it's Maybelline. No. Goddamn. Anyways. But then you have the other end of that, right? Where the more flesh you are, the less technology you have, you're kind of discriminated against. It does become kind of a racial problem. And the entire reason why we did it that way is because they see technology as the means to an end. Old age, doesn't matter if you can just replace the parts. So what if your hard drive starts malfunctioning? Your brain still kind of exists in there. You're fine. You're fine. Just take your dementia pills. Don't worry, you're not seeing weird worms in the background. That's all your imagination. But having said that, right? Then we have to start talking about other things, right? What about people who start off organic and then try to build up as machines? You know, actual cyborgs. Well, their lives get a little bit more complex because now they've still got to play to organic rules, at least to some extent. I mean, it's all well and good that you've got these robotic limbs and all that, but at the end of the day, you're still a flesh bag. You just bought your way into, you know, your capabilities. You're not all that impressive. Not compared to, you know, someone who's just a machine. And then that's not even talking about, like, what kind of prosthetics do you have, or what kind of, like, mechanisms do you have. I mean, cool, you're a fantastic great warrior. That's great. But do you have the great sword that comes out of your arm? No? Ah, man, I got that upgrade like 2 months ago, and honestly, it's been the best thing I ever purchased. So obviously, I'm better than you are. Then comes down to how they survive. And me and Sasquatch have talked quite a bit about this. They essentially have to eat at least a small chunk of what is known as a gravity crystal in our little world, right? And gravity crystals are not exactly the easiest thing to manufacture, but they're also not the hardest thing. However, considering they're supposed to be a prized item, the fact that someone is eating them says volumes. So imagine being in a place where your payment isn't actually money. You are essentially a live-in maid or butler or cook or whatever, and your payment is you get this little tiny crystal that's about the size of the tip of a pinky. And this is going to give you enough power to survive the next 6 months. But keep in mind that this is your payment, right? So if you do a poor job or something like that, quite literally your benefactor can just go, You know what? Nah, you didn't do a good enough job. We're gonna give you half of your payment because we feel like you didn't earn it. You didn't earn enough. It's not worth it to give it to you. It'd be a waste on you. We're gonna give you half this amount, and you're just gonna have to double down on your work to get more. Yeah. Yeah, you can already see where this is going. Sasquatch, I assume that you saw this movie. It's a bit old at this point. Wow, is it old now that I think about it. Galaxy Express 999.
It sounds familiar enough, yes.
Okay, I think that thing's far enough away that I could get away with doing this. Galaxy Express 999 takes place in the same universe as, I think it was called Battleship, fuck, I'm trying to remember. Battleship Yamato or something like that. It's these are really old shows and movies. Galaxy Express. Then you had Galaxy Express 999. Then you had. Oh, that one's on me. Then you had fuck, my brain is dead. Anyways, in that movie, they basically the robots actually take pills, and at some point in the movies, you actually find out that those pills are actually made via human souls. Yeah, they were literally collecting the corpses of fallen people and refining the souls into small bits of energy that robots were eating to fuel themselves. And some of the robots, when they actually found out this, actually started revolting because they refused to be that kind of fucked up. But others obviously just saw it as a sign of prestige. It's like, oh, cool. I am so great that I simply just eat your soul. Yeah. It's just a little fucked up, you know? Just a little.
Just a teeny tiny bit.
Once again, very old movie. Practically ancient. But yeah, no, essentially that's something similar to what we did with Ozzy Mistra. Though the crystals aren't human souls. I love how Sasquatch just got really silent after that because he knows exactly what they're made of.
Uh-huh. I say nothing. You can't make me.
Demon, do you remember what they are?
Not off the top of my head.
Demon actually played through the campaign where we originally introduced the the Gossic tree. It is actually human souls. Your world runs on soul power. And everybody just goes quiet. Okay, cool, whatever.
Yay, dead air! Huzzah!
Anyways, so the Empire basically runs on gravity crystals, which runs off of gravity stone, which is generally found in layer number 1. Which means the topmost echelons literally work to death the bottommost echelons. Which means that you have characters like Sindria here, who essentially were working their ever-loving asses off just so that they could, you know, pick apart good trash, right, that fell down to where Sindria was, and try to make a profit off of that trash. And by making a profit off of that trash, they could stimulate their economy to keep afloat well enough to just scratch by. While the autocracy that's on the top levels is literally using them just so that they can have a recycling crew that they don't actually need to invest in. They do the work of their own accord. This is how they live. Why would they do anything else? They enjoy doing this kind of work. Listen, they can decide for themselves if they want to, you know, do this kind of stuff. It's not our fault that they're digging through toxic trash. I mean, maybe they should have just got those robotic lungs like Jeremy over there. I mean, after all, it only costed him 4 platinum.
And that was a steal, yeah.
Yeah, that was a steal. 4 platinum. I mean, these guys just need to get better augmentics.
I hope he's able to pay off that loan. Would hate to see the repo guy come get him.
the fucking repo. Oh God, we put Repo the Genetic Opera into our game. I just realized that we did that.
I was waiting for you to get there.
Son of a bitch.
And now we're obligated to do a musical episode.
Hey, I have been banned from doing musicals, remember? You guys wouldn't let me. Ever since I did the You Remind Me of the Babe thing, everybody's banned me from musicals. Anyways, back to the world building. So at the top, obviously, is the Emperor, who his citizens consider him as to a god. Is he actually a god? At this point, he probably thinks he is. Let's just be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, the Empire's a pretty fucked up place. Not only that, but they have a bad habit of turning animals into robots. Geese, moose, salmon, king crabs. Fun fact, king crab is actually a lobster.
It is. Just don't tell other mainers that.
I'm just waiting for Demon to pitch in on that one.
I'm having fun building an alchemist.
Oh, you're making a character right now? Nice.
Yep.
I'm just glad we were able to actually get the server back up. Anyways. So, yeah, there's just a taste of the Empire. The religion literally follows the ideals of a god emperor. You have a bunch of people who feel that mechanical augmentation trumps anything else, right? So if you do not have mechanical augmentation, you're just another nobody. And they basically treat anything that's organic as subpar. So if you're, I want to say human, but I gotta use human in a very broad perspective here. They basically just look down on you. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. You're just not worth their time and effort. So let's take a step back a little bit. Let's talk about a kingdom that has no religion per se. Let's talk about where Sindria comes from. So obviously you grew up in a trash heap, right?
Yep.
In this trash heap, the person who's on the top of the trash heap generally has the best junk, right?
They always get the first pick of the new junk that comes in. Anything they don't want just basically settles down for anybody else underneath them.
Yeah, sounds about right. And then, more or less, the class system there is the farther down you are, the worse off you are. Like, they could really give a shit less if you're a certain level below you. Almost identical to the ideals of the layer system in the world itself, right? Top gets the best, and bottom gets, well, the garbage.
Yep.
So,
What was that one movie where it was a prison and they basically had food that came down the tower level by level?
I actually don't know that reference.
Oh yeah, that one. Oh god, what
That
movie
movie.
was that
So basically, the people on the higher pairings for the tower basically get the best choice of the food, and they'll take as much food as they can get. And basically, by the time it gets to the bottom, there's almost nothing left.
Oh, wow.
So basically, you're fighting for scraps at that point. And you know, some people are like trying to like sit on the well, in the end, I think somebody like tries to like sit on the dropping platform as it goes down to basically prevent people from taking all the food all at once.
Wow.
That's what people were doing on the top levels. Is basically they came from the bottom level because every like few months they change up the who is on what level.
Oh,
So you
damn.
might be on the top level one time, and then next time you might be on the very bottom. So you go from being the first one to eat to being the last one to eat. And so basically, it's like you're fighting for food.
Jeez.
The platform.
Yep.
That sounds horrific, honestly. But yeah,
But that's basically level 2 in a nutshell. Is we're already on the scraps, and we're basically fighting for who gets the best scraps.
yeah, no joke. At least you weren't born on level 1. Or not level 1, but tier 1 of the islands.
The very bottom.
So, me and Sasquatch have actually flushed this out, and your character might know this more as a rumor, so something to keep in the back of your mind, right? The way that we developed the bottommost rungs of the world, essentially the best way to describe it is you have two different sects of people. You have the first sect, which are workers, like actual bona fide workers. And these guys do a job of going down into what we are essentially going to call the deep dark, despite the fact that it's not the traditional deep dark of D&D or Pathfinder, right? Now, they essentially delve the bottom to get gravity stone that they can ship through the rest of the world. Very lucrative business. Well, obviously, why use proper work when you can also have slaves? Of which, essentially, that is the other half of the deep dark area. You have this area that is filled with essentially slaves. And these slaves can be robots, automatons, androids, cyborgs, or even just long-lived races. And the reason why I say that is because their job is to not just sift through the crap. I forgot to make something. It's not just to sift through the crap, but it's also to basically do stuff that others won't. And the idea is they get just enough to be alive and semi-healthy. And I say semi-healthy because having a perfectly healthy slave gives a chance for rebellion. You want these people to be sick. I think we mentioned Dune earlier. Thufir, later on in the series, actually gets poisoned by the Baron Harkonnen.
And he has to milk a cat, yes.
And the Baron actually goes, feed him the antidote. Make it part of his everyday diet. So if he ever decides to defect, he's not a problem. He is a quite literal non-problem. And that was literally how they treated it. And in this case, I think that's a good way to... Good way. God. That's the way they probably would treat these slaves, is they would probably constantly be poisoning them, but also feeding them an antidote constantly. And the way I see that, right, is chances are they might... the food itself that they feed them might be toxic. But then every night they basically give them vitamin pills, and the vitamin pills make them feel better. To the point to where if they don't eat their vitamins, quote unquote, they will get sick and die. It's a very messed up, funky way of doing it, but honestly, for storytelling purposes, it means your slaves can never leave. Because if they're constantly poisoned, if they don't receive their antidotes, yeah, they're going to get off the island, but they're not going to get very far. Just another dead body amongst the drift, right? And I'm sure living in a trash heap, you've probably found your fair share of bodies, haven't you, Centria?
Of course, of course. And you always have to burn them.
But why do you burn them?
Because if you let them sit, they'll rot.
Well, yeah, but you're kind of already covered in an area full of rot. I mean, what's a little bit more rot to you?
So there's a difference between garbage rot and flesh rot. Most of the time is you can pick clean the garbage, whereas if a body dies, you're generally not wanting to touch it because you don't want to be associated with having been near that body because you might get in trouble. So, you just burn it.
So literally it's to cover your own ass so that you don't get in trouble over dumb stuff.
Yep. Because what if somebody's trying to frame you for a murder? So you're just like, well, I'm just going to get rid of the body. No body, no evidence.
I mean, fair. I mean, seems logical to me, doesn't it, Sasquatch? Like...
It does.
Whee! I hope this is side note.
You should play
I feel like this
Helldivers.
is.
I should what?
I feel like
You should play Helldivers.
I cannot do that during the stream only because that requires a lot more attention. And diplomacy. And democracy.
Now, there's no diplomacy. It's only democracy. And a lot of it. Nothing but democracy.
I saw a video of, God, the world of Helldivers by itself is a fun world. Like, it's simple in its context, but like when you actually look at like how well they developed everything, it's actually a very interesting universe that almost parodies Warhammer 40k. People have basically started calling it The
40K
Warhammer.
light.
Well, that too. I was gonna say 20K. Well, in 20K, that was when you had the Rise of the Machines, right? The automatons. It's when you had a bunch of Xenos races starting to pop up, right?
The Illuminate.
Tyranids. Basically,
The Xenos weren't mindless, were they?
No, they really weren't. No.
So they'd be more like the sculptors of flesh, aka the Illuminate. And then basically you'd have the bugs.
There's some argument to be had there, but yeah, people are trying to make it like basically the early years of 40K, which both makes sense and doesn't make sense at all. But hey, whatever gets your Gavins off, right? Okay. So what else do we want to cover before we just kind of kill the stream for today? Because yeah, it hasn't been 2 hours, but I think we've kind of covered what the basic idea of world builders is we go in, we build a world, we discuss it, we talk about like all the nitpicky details, and go from there. Such as now we've actually fleshed out a little bit more Sindria's area of the world. Because honestly, we hadn't even thought about like if Sindria had to deal with bodies or anything like that prior. And for me, the reason why I was asking is like, well, we just talked about these people that were, you know, trying to escape their settlements. I could imagine that you probably come across like, several of their bodies. But if you're just burning them because it's just kind of a law-based thing, that makes a lot of sense. Like, you
I do
would
have...
not...
For Sindria is she does have one body that she does carry with her in at least the form of ashes. That's you know, the one person that she actually loved back on her level. Basically, the one father killed her because she was with my character and didn't accept it, and so he killed his own daughter.
Yeah.
And so I just carry around her ashes. Nobody knows. I just do.
You might want to put that in your inventory.
A locket of ashes. That's all I need.
There you go. Heck, you can even set the value to zero gold, because to you it's invaluable. It also means that people like Sun Yolo are less likely to actually sell it.
I mean, if he does, you know, there's just gonna be one less Sun Yolo in the world.
You act like there's more than... Well, actually, technically.
Technically, yeah.
Technically there is, because you made it canonical.
I mean, we have kind of duplicated him for the sake of a bad joke. We have...
I mean, they do diplomacy for basically the same reason.
A bad joke, yeah. But, I mean, that's because we had Zap Brannigan kind of trying to push diplomacy. At least he pushed diplomacy in two separate ways. The form of personal diplomacy is the hip thrust. The form of not personal diplomacy is blowing shit up. But yeah, so yeah, I think we've done enough for the first stream. So now comes the important part. And I say this with the idea of this is what we're going to do every time, and we're going to try our best to set things up in a way that's going to work for the future, right? What do we want to do for World Builders next time we meet, which will be in 2 weeks, mind you.
Press back up.
Good question.
Remember, we can discuss already pre-existing worlds. We can discuss a D&D world. We could make a brand new campaign. The choice is really up in the air. The idea is we are going to build a world from scratch, or maybe not from scratch, but at least review it, and try to get into the nitty-gritty of what those worlds are. From religions, down to ethnicities, down to whatever. So, I mean, we can even do stuff like Don.
Welcome to Imperial Desert Botanical Testing Station number 10. I am Dr.
I mean, technically, we could also do things like Kitty Grass.
Like what?
That time I got reincarnated as a slime.
True. I mean, that is on the table.
Or even like Tsukimichi Moonlit Fantasy and those kinds of worlds.
This is true, and honestly, I actually enjoyed that show. If anything, I like the fact that that character is overpowered without being...
He wants to not be overpowered. He just wanted to, like, basically live in exile in a sense, but basically kept on getting dragged into shit that he wasn't really, like, supposed to be there for.
Yeah, the goddess basically kept dragging him into situations that he didn't want to. But yeah, it still comes down to what do we want to discuss next time. There's the long and short of it.
Well, now that the campaigns are over, we could always dissect one of the finished ones. Do a post-mortem.
We could. We could actually go into World of Astrangia. And I think that's a good one because we have an ample amount of knowledge of that one.
Yep.
So how's that sound, Demon? You down for doing some Astrangia next week, or at least sitting in on it?
You can sit down in it.
Alright. So I think that's our game plan. Starting, not next week, but next session, we are going to talk about Astrangia. And what makes Astrangia so important to us is that was our first D&D campaign, so a lot of the lore was kind of made haphazardly.
Yeah, that was more of a developed as we needed it.
Yeah, and it still turned out to be a pretty fun campaign. I think everybody enjoyed it up until the final fight, which I sadly gimped that one. That one was my fault. I should have chose a better final boss, so to speak. So that's completely on me on that one. All right, so I'm gonna close out like I used to, and we'll just see how things go, and we'll see if anybody even watches this dang thing, because who knows nowadays. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Hopefully you guys had fun. And yeah, I know it's not the best first episode. I know we kind of went all over the place, but we're also trying to find our groove here. And hopefully...
Yeah, more dead air than I should have allowed. Apologize for that.
Oh, it's not your fault. If anything, it's more my fault because I'm supposed to be the host. It's my job to fill the dead air. But I digress. Thank you everybody for joining. Hopefully you guys had fun. Take care, stay safe, stay well, and just remember, while a world can be varied, interesting, and diverse, it's still something that's mostly in your head. So have fun with it. Enjoy it. And keep Dio out. Good night, everybody. Yes, that was a Jungle reference.
Figured.
Boop, boop, boop. You will not be